What is up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the SomeWhatSports Podcast. And my name is Chris, and I'm joined by not two titans of the industry this week. I'm joined by three titans of the industry this week. And it happens once a year, but Somewhat Sports gets taken over by a certain network that we won't name because we're frenemies at the moment. So we're gonna keep it like a civil war. No friends on this podcast, Jurg. I'm sorry, but we have stolen one of their best. His name's not Jurg, but Jurg is with us this week. Jurg and Dame, how are we this week?
I'm doing good. I'm happy. I'm excited that we have a special guest today. I've always said I wanted to bring on another voice to talk some hockey with us, and I've accomplished that goal today. But he can talk other sports too. But that, of course, is a little tease for the people. But I brought on one of my close compatriots that I've podcasted with in the past today, and I'm very excited for him to be introduced to the boys as well, because this is the first time that he is meeting both Chris and Dame.
Oh,
Go ahead, Dame.
Chris?
No, you're good. You're good.
Interrupting me, bro.
Go.
I got nothing to say anyway, but I'm doing good. Same old shit, different day. Oh, it was a rough day yesterday as a Jets fan, but I'm here today.
Yeah, you can make the argument that every day is a rough day as a Jets fan, but yesterday in particular, I agree. But yes, as Jurg mentioned, one of his friends has joined us, and now he's our friend because any of Jurg's friends is the Somewhat Sports family's friend. Kenneth, my man, how are you this week? Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, Jurg said that you needed a hockey guy. What better guy to have on than a Canadian for that sort of talk? But yeah, I do cover a lot of other sports as well, football, basketball, whatever it is. So excited to be on here today and just chat some sports with you guys.
Goated, really goated. Well, I didn't even know you were Canadian. That's real? You're Canadian?
I am Canadian, yeah. I don't have like the really strong Canadian accent. I don't say A as much as a lot of the other ones up here, but yeah, I am Canadian, born and raised. So.
Oh shit, that's awesome. Yeah, Somewhat Sports is going all over the world, Jurg. Look at you, good find.
Wait, real quick. What was Dame muttering when you were talking, Chris?
Yeah, what kind of question is that? Are you for real? Like,
I didn't say are for real. I said, is that an actual is that for real? I didn't say are you real? You dumb fuck. Obviously, I know he's real.
It's so stupid ass question.
I've never met a Canadian before. I mean, I still haven't because this is through visual. I mean, whatever. Okay, but anyway, Somewhat Sports is all over the world now. But I think it's fitting that, well, like we always do, we start off with NHL. That's led by Jurg, but this is going to be a monumental moment because now NHL is joined and talked about by two greats, Jurg and Kenneth. So, boys, I'm not going to take up any more of your time. Talk to us. What do we got about the NHL?
Well, we're not going to waste any time either. We're going to dive straight into it. Kenneth, both you and me as hockey fans, we always hope that every single time come the NHL trade deadline that, big moves happen, because we always hear about the NFL trade deadline during the NFL season. We always hear about the NBA because those sports happen at around the same time. And the NBA trade deadline most certainly delivered this year, if you just think about the Harden-Simmons deal in and of itself, along with other trades that happen. And we're always hoping that the NHL trade deadline ends up delivering as well here. And for my money, Kenneth, I kind of think it actually did on the surface. So the way that we're going to break it down, a lot of different deals happen. But what me and Kenneth are going to do, we're going to focus on the four main players that were active during the days leading up to and day of the trade deadline, because a vast majority of the deals that happened in regards to the NHL trade deadline happened through four teams. There were four teams that were main players. Some of them I had mentioned actually in previous weeks as teams that should be active around this time. So we're not going to waste any time here. Kenneth, we're going to go start with the Seattle Kraken first and foremost. Now, a couple weeks back on this podcast, I had actually slated the Seattle Kraken as a team to really be a seller come the trade deadline, Kenneth. I think of the underwhelming season that they've had in their first year as an expansion team. I think of the struggles that they've had towards the beginning of the franchise and also way back at expansion. They didn't do what Vegas did in terms of acquiring a lot of future assets, such as their predecessor, and they really had to do that at this trade deadline here. And they did that in spades with a couple of deals, some really more small deals here that we're just going to brush up on. But Kenneth, I want to hit like the main deal first and foremost, because we've definitely talked about this team on a number of occasions when we've talked hockey. Mark Giordano getting moved to the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs, of course, have been in the conversation of adding a defenseman around this time, and they get Giordano from Seattle for 2 seconds and a third rounder. Kenneth, what was your reaction when you saw this deal? Because I heard about it, but I really didn't believe it until the news finally broke.
So, I mean, first of all, up here, like, because we do like an NHL trade deadline show through TSN and everything, like, I get alerts of every trade that happens up here, obviously, given I'm Canadian and, hockey is king up here. So, the Giordano move, I was okay with it for both sides because, I mean, let's face it, the Leafs weren't going to fix goaltending at the deadline. Like, they've never prioritized goaltending for whatever reason, because that's the reason why they always go home in the first round. But defense was the next biggest hole, and so bringing in a guy like Giordano, I think, is big. He was obviously the captain of the Kraken, so it'll be interesting to see who they appoint as their new captain. But 2 seconds and a third, I think it's a steal for the Kraken because you really don't want to pay that guy when you're not going to win a lot of games. But now you acquire future assets, as you said. They weren't going to be Vegas because they didn't have those young assets, so I really like the trade for both sides because Toronto really needed to beef up the blue line as well.
Absolutely. You think of some of the injuries that they had this season with Muzzin and a couple guys underperforming on that team as well. Giordano, I think a lot of people, they were arguing this deal because of how much it could cost the Leafs. Kenneth, I think this was a massive swing for the Leafs because they didn't have to give up a first in this trade. I think that was Kyle Dubas's main goal at the deadline here with making any acquisition, not giving up that first round pick this year. Because I think he learned a very hard lesson from what happened with Nick Foligno at last year's deadline, huh?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the thing is, because they acquire 2 seconds, there's nothing to say that they can't move up into the first round if they want to. I don't think they should. I think they should wait another year. I think that next year's draft is going to be a lot better, but definitely with getting 3 draft picks, I mean, that's always huge for a trade like this.
Absolutely. And for Giordano, while a lot of people have had questions about his production in his age, I think a big thing about him is his durability. He's still been pretty reliable in terms of being able to play. And I think the Leafs are going to be able to slot him in that top 4 really nice as they try to compete for the best position possible here in their playoff race, because it's looking like they're going to get a tough first round matchup no matter who they end up facing in the first, whether it be Tampa or Florida, or most likely one of those 2 teams at the end of the day. So that was a big time deal there. The biggest name that Seattle had to give up. Of course, there were a couple other small deals as well. Mason Appleton was traded back to the Winnipeg Jets. He was on Winnipeg, of course, and he had been swiped by Seattle at the expansion draft. They got a 4th round pick back for him. Marcus Johansson, this was actually a guy, Kenneth, that I pointed out. It made sense for them to end up trading, and they trade him to Washington, so a team that he has history with. It was his first team in the league. They got a 4th and a 6th round pick back. They also got Daniel Sprong back, which I found was very interesting because Daniel Sprong, I felt, has really struggled since he's hit the NHL to find a consistent role on a team. Pittsburgh had traded him to Anaheim. He was traded to Washington. I forget the exact deal that ended up sending him there was. And now he gets traded to Seattle. Kind of a reclamation project, I think, if you're Seattle, but considering the roster construction, considering the state of the team this year, I think they have more than the right amount of opportunities to be able to give Sprong in terms of him potentially finding a role in that top 6, especially with some injuries that they've had as well. I think that could be a very nice low-key pickup for them. It's more so these last 2 deals that I kind of want to focus on here, Kenneth, because for all the faults that Ron Francis has as GM, and trust me, it has not been a very good time so far in Seattle, I gotta say, he did a pretty good job on these last 2 deals, and I'll just say them back to back because he got a good return here for both. He traded Cal Yarncroc to the Calgary Flames for a 2nd round pick this year, a 3rd round pick next year, and a 7th round pick down the line. Of course, that 7th is going to be the best asset of them all somehow, some way, knowing the NHL logic sometimes. But this was the real surprise here. Jeremy Lauzon was sent to the Nashville Predators for a 2nd round pick this year. This definitely caught my eye. Kenneth, what were your reaction to these 2 deals? 2 decent players, especially Yarncroc, but the fact that they got a 2nd rounder in each trade back.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I really like the Johansson move for them. I just think that the thing is, like, Seattle, they're just not winning games, and shockingly, they're not the worst team in the league this year. Somehow, Arizona still figures out a way to be a lot worse than them. And Montreal coming off their cup run last year. So for me, these trades, like, they're very, like, I'm trying to think of how I want to put this. Like, getting a guy like Sprong is good because they really are going to give him an opportunity, and if it pans out, it pans out, and if it doesn't, oh well. Like, they still got draft picks back. So for me, Seattle, they should just be stockpiling draft picks. And I don't normally like going that route because we haven't really seen them draft. Like, how are they going to draft? Because you can have all these picks all you want, but if you can't go out and actually find players and have a good scouting department, then it really doesn't mean anything. But the fact that Seattle has loaded up with as many picks as they have, that's going to be huge for them moving forward. They can move up, they can move down. They have a lot of versatility there now. And then this is going to be a 3 to 5 year project for sure for them to even get back to being competitive. So acquiring all these picks, I think, is huge for Seattle.
Yeah, and you mentioned it, Kenneth. Usually not the way that teams tend to go, because we especially see contenders, one that we'll talk about here in a few moments. They have no issues when it comes to trading draft picks. But I think I think you look back, I think even Seattle's organization realized that the expansion draft didn't go the way that they thought it would, and it just made the most sense to trade off pieces that they could. And heck, this year's draft, they have 4 second-round picks and 3 fourth-round picks. And then next year's draft, they have 3 seconds, 2 thirds, and 3 fourths. It's really going to test the scouting department there in Seattle because, like you said, we've only seen their first draft class, and we don't even know like how that draft class is going to be, because I want to say Beniers, I don't even think he's in the minors. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think he went back to Michigan for this year's NCAA. Yeah. So, remains to be seen what the future of Seattle could be. Chris is actually, he's become a bit of a hockey fan. He has lashed himself onto the Seattle Kraken being an expansion team. So
Kraken wagon.
So Chris, in and of itself, he's obviously going to hope that that good things can come from these future draft picks in and of itself. Speaking of someone on this podcast hoping their team can end up getting something out of draft picks, well, let's just go to my team next, because I said my team should be a seller at the deadline, and thankfully they didn't disappoint me. But this is the beauty of Bowman not being the general manager anymore. The Chicago Blackhawks had 2 main names floating around on the roster the entire time. It was Marc-Andre Fleury and it was Brendan Hagel. When the reports came out, Kenneth, that Hagel could have potentially been traded for a first, I lost my mind, because I was just like, seriously, we're going to get a first for this guy? Because if you had told me in the preseason that Brendan Hagel could be traded and you could get a first-round pick back for him, I would have looked at you like you went insane. So the fact that they could have gotten a first for him and more as they did, that was a nice thing to see. But we're going to focus on Fleury first, Kenneth, because this was the big trade. Fleury, obviously, Chicago had acquired him back in the summer from Vegas for literally nothing. And the big thing with Fleury was that Chicago's defense has underperformed a lot this season. Fleury, some are saying he's not as great as he was last year. And while his stats are down, I think that's more so predominantly on the blue line. I think he's done a fine enough job in Chicago for what it was worth. They tried to do a quick patchwork of this mini rebuild, and they tried to cheat it. Didn't work, and they had to suffer a little bit for it. And so Fleury coming up, the whole thing was, if he hadn't gotten traded, it would have been on his wish list, because the number one thing for Kyle Davidson at the end of the day was to honor what Marc-Andre Fleury wanted, especially after what happened for Fleury at the end of his Vegas tenure. And they did right by him. He had a no-trade list. Minnesota was not on it, and he told the Blackhawks he wanted to go there, and they made the deal work. It is just one pick. It is a 2022 second-rounder, but it can be moved up into the first round with conditions if the Wild make a run to the conference finals and Fleury wins 4 of those playoff games. Then it actually gets upgraded to a first. So very, very rare is it do interdivision trades happen? So Chicago sending him to Minnesota. What was your reaction to that one, especially how big of an upgrade this is for the Wild as they try to make a playoff run here, Kenneth?
So question for you was, did Fleury have Toronto on his no-trade list?
I don't remember if he did, because I think a lot of people make the joke that whenever guys ask for no trade lists, it's usually all the Canadian teams plus Buffalo on there in order to avoid those situations, especially the Canadian taxes. But off of memory, I really don't think he had Toronto or Edmonton. The team that I know for sure he had was Washington, funny enough. He did not want to be traded to the Capitals in any way, shape, or form. That goes back to his Pittsburgh days. So any Penguins fans, there's still loyalty there in some way, because he's like, I'm not playing for the Capitals. But honestly, I don't remember or think off the top of my head he had Toronto or Edmonton on his no trade list.
Because I'm looking at situations like that, and the Wild goaltending wasn't in a terrible spot. Like, it wasn't great. Obviously, when you have Cam Talbot, like, Edmonton knows, like, that's not a great situation to be in. He's been a lot better since he's left, because he actually has a defense in front of him now. But I look at Fleury's and I'm like, all you had to give up was a second rounder. And if you're looking at Toronto, you've got like they're giving Eric Kallgren games right now, like because Mrazek's been terrible. You've got Jack Campbell who's hurt right now, so I feel like they could have got more for Fleury. But that being said, you as a Blackhawks fan, I mean, you're hoping that the Wild go to the West Finals and Fleury from back in Vegas, so you can turn this into a first round pick. But I mean, even if it ends up being a second rounder, I still think that it's a good trade for you guys. I don't think Fleury was in the long term plans for you, so just moving on from him, I think was a good move. I just feel like you could have maybe got more, especially from those teams like Edmonton or Toronto. If they weren't on his list, then you're telling me that you couldn't have got a first rounder or multiple picks from teams like that, because we saw Toronto go all in. They went and got Giordano. So now you would have thought that they would have gone after a guy like Fleury, because that would make them true cup contenders if they got him.
Right. And I think part of it could be at the end of the day, maybe there could have been interest, but I think the Blackhawks went to Fleury directly. And even aside from no trade list, is there a team that you look at that you really want to go to? And I think it was a big thing for Chicago to make sure that they acquiesced to Fleury, because it was a question when they had even traded for him if he was going to stay. And I think the fact that he showed the loyalty enough to stay, to end out his contract to play with Chicago, I think they wanted to reward him. And I think it was a great deal by Kyle Davidson to do that. I don't think Bowman would have respected it as much. And I refuse to believe he's going to do anything right anymore, because he's an absolute scumbag in my book. Always has been, always will be, especially after, things that came out over the last year. But I think that was the biggest deal for Chicago here. Could they have gotten something back? I definitely think so. I honestly, maybe not Toronto. I would have tried to stretch for Edmonton, because I think Dubas really tried to keep that first. I think you could have convinced Ken Holland to maybe give up that first round pick and try to fleece him yet again in a deal when it comes to an old player in a Blackhawks uniform, because they did that last summer with Dunks as well. But I think it was a good enough return back. A second round pick is not bad, and you're 1,000% right. I'm cheering for the Minnesota Wild now to make it to the Western Conference Finals, and Fleury just absolutely just tears it up like he did in his first year in Vegas when they made it to the Stanley Cup Finals. So go Minnesota! I'm right behind you, boys. Absolutely, and I also like Kirill Kaprizov, so that don't hurt. But the big deal for Chicago was the Brendan Hagel trade. Kenneth, like I said, if you would have told me this before the season, it would have been this. I would have been shocked. I think a lot of people would have. Brendan Hagel to Tampa Bay for Taylor Radish, Tkachuk, first round pick this year. A first round pick in 2023 and a first round pick in 2024. Both top 10 protected. Those picks are probably going to end up staying in those years. If they get moved, they get moved. But those are, you could say, Chicago definitely is getting 2 first-round picks out of this deal. And back the other way, they send Brendan Hagel and 2 fourth-round picks, one this year and one in 2024, to Tampa Bay. The price for a bottom 6 forward, Kenneth, has drastically changed, both contract-wise and both trade asset-wise. I think there's a lot of ways to look at this. When you saw the return Chicago got, like, what did you think the same thing? Like, wow, the NHL trade market has hit a real reset button with this one.
Yeah, they definitely have. Like, first of all, the players involved. I mean, Radish and Tkachuk. I mean, they're 24 and 23, so they're not like, they still could be something. Like, I still don't think that they're great players, but they're players that you can plug in to your third and fourth line and probably get some production out of. But getting the 2 first-round picks, and I know that they're top 10 protected, but let's face it, Tampa's not going to be in the top 10 conversation anyways for the next couple of years, given all the talent they have there. And all you had to do was send a couple of 4th-round picks and Brandon Hagel. I mean, I get it. Tampa wants to win 3 straight, but wow, that's a lot to give up for a guy like that. I think it's an absolute steal for Chicago. I would be praising Tampa Bay for allowing you to get those picks off of them.
Yeah, it was really wild. I think the real value for Tampa was the fact that after this season, Hagel's still under contract for 2 more years at just a 1.5 million cap hit. And I think for them, you saw what the formula was for those back-to-back cups, and they're trying to recreate, because when you think about it, they lost that whole third line in the offseason from when they won the cup. They lost Yanni Gourde to Seattle, they lost Coleman in a contract to Calgary, and they lost Barclay Goodrow to the New York Rangers. So they're trying to recreate that. They also made another deal with the Senators with for Paul, who's slots right into the bottom 6, either third or fourth center line. I think for Tampa, they're literally going all in. If I had to equate it for anyone that doesn't know hockey, this is the LA Rams approach, which is F them draft picks. We're just going for the championship. And the funny thing is like Tampa's already won the cup twice. So you really can say it's like they don't have to do this. But what I like from Tampa is that it shows that they're continuing to be hungry and that there is a level of confidence in this team, in the development. Because you got to think about it, Kenneth. A lot of the guys who have popped off for them the last couple of years. Like Palat was a late round pick. Tyler Johnson, who's on Chicago, funny enough, right now was undrafted. Yanni Gourde was a late round pick. Brendan Point, I want to say, was a third or a fourth round pick. Like Tampa's pretty good at this whole development thing when it comes to the AHL. So I'm not necessarily surprised here that they are just going all in for this run that they have. And honestly, I like it because I'm one. I think you're the same, Ken. Where it's like we always want to see teams that have this potential just go all in, and that's exactly what Tampa Bay is doing. So hey, I'm all for it. And my team got the 2 first round picks, so you're not going to hear me complain about it in any way, shape, or form. Chicago, especially with having most likely no first round pick this year, because the Blackhawks pick that they sent to Columbus would have to end up being in the top 2 for them to get it back this year. But then our first next year would go to Columbus. So it's like preparing for the likely scenario because the Blackhawks aren't bad enough right now. I think they're in the top 5, top 6 for contention. I don't think they're going to win the lottery. So probably best stock up on depth draft picks, style up as well, I guess. They got 2 seconds this year and 3/3. I think that was a big deal for Chicago in terms of the likely scenario where they're not going to get their own first because, Bowman. Moving on from that and me being slightly happier about how my team is doing this season, not results wise, but at least, off ice stuff.
Hey man, I'm a Red Wings fan. It started out real strong and then they've since faded into obscurity. So, I mean, come on, we're only 21 points back with 19 games left, so I'm sure that we still have a chance, right?
Hey, you just got to be perfect, in an imperfect world of sports.
Yeah, 19 straight. I see it. I definitely see it with this group.
I will say this though, Kenneth, like Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider, like
we've drafted well, and I think Nedeljkovic, the second you get any sort of defense in front of him, I think he's going to show that he is playing. He's a much better goalie than how he's playing this year. So, yeah, I mean, you just have to trust the process with Detroit, and who knows, maybe win the lottery for whatever reason because the NHL is weird with their lottery.
Right. Hey, if Detroit does win it this year and they get a first or second overall pick, this may not be the strongest draft class, but at the same time, not a bad thing to add a top 2.
I'd prefer to win it next year. I'll say that
course.
much, given the talent that we know is there in next year's draft.
Oh, 1,000%. Everyone's gunning for that. That's why I hope Columbus gets our first round pick this year because I want to make sure we have our first for next year. Moving on to another team in the West. This team was right up there in the 2010s, contending with both of our teams, Kenneth, because Detroit was still a contender the first half of the decade. Chicago, of course, winning the Cups. This team was right there with Detroit and Chicago for a very long time. That's the Anaheim Ducks. They've fallen off since they've gone through a rebuild. They've showed some promise this season, but I brought them up a couple weeks back because I always felt that, yes, they're having that good year, but we've started to see it where they're starting to take that step back. And there are a couple guys on this team that are going to hit unrestricted free agency. And it's like, do you risk losing these guys for nothing? And Anaheim management clearly said, hey, we're very appreciative of what this roster has done, but we can sell these guys off and we could just let the young guys play and we can compete for next year. And that is absolutely what they did. The 2 main deals will start with Josh Manson going to the Colorado Avalanche for essentially 2 second-round picks because the player they got back in Drew Hellison was a former second-round pick by the Colorado Avalanche, and they also got a second-rounder for next year from the Avs as well. It felt like a basic deal, Kenneth. When I saw this, I'm like, oh, right shot defenseman is of a high-value commodity in the NHL nowadays. So the fact that they got 2 second-rounders for him, maybe not so much for Anaheim because I think the 2 seconds is a nice return. What does this do for Colorado's defensive core?
I mean, Colorado, like as you said, we're excited to see teams actually going all in because Colorado last year, they were my pick to win the Cup. They fell short, but this is a team that they're ready to win now. They have all the pieces in place in order to do it. I mean, and if you're looking at the Ducks, I mean, they've still got great young players like Troy Terry, you've got Zegras, you've got Drysdale, Lundstrom. So this isn't a team that was going to make the playoffs this year. It's better to just offload some of these assets that you don't really need moving forward because people forget guys like Zegras, who's like 21 years old, like he's the future of that team. So they don't really need a lot of these other guys. So, I mean, I look at like the Josh Manson move and like he's obviously a friend of mine. We grew up together in the same city here in Saskatchewan. So I was happy to see him move to an actual contender. I think he's gone from being a bottom 6 forward to now being one of those guys that you can rely on night in and night out. He's a physical guy, very good. So I really like that move as far as Colorado goes. So overall, I look at what Anaheim did. I'm glad that they sold because, yeah, as you said, they're having a great year, but it's not getting to the playoffs. So why are you going to wait on these guys to ultimately not get there and then their value's gone? So I think that they made great moves at the deadline.
Absolutely. And, again, Manson, good guy to fill out the top four. A free agent after this season. So Anaheim, maybe you risk losing him because a contender is going to throw a nice contract Manson's way. Because again, top four right shot defenseman in today's game, Kenneth, that's one of the most valuable assets a team can acquire.
Well, and
So the
you
fact
got to throw money at Manson. The guy's an absolute man rocket. How can you not want to throw money at that guy?
You're not wrong there, my friend. You're not wrong there. Now, moving on, because that wasn't the only blue line deal that Anaheim made. They made one as well for team Kenneth that we've talked a little bit about before this season. The Boston Bruins making a massive deal. They acquire Hampus Lindholm from Anaheim for a very steep price point. John Moore, who is a solid depth defenseman, Anaheim needed to get a defenseman back just to finish out the season, so they get him back. Urho Vakanainen, a relatively young guy. I want to say he's 22, 23, still has a little bit of upside, so Anaheim can work with him. But this is the big thing. First round pick this year, second round pick next year, second round pick 2 years down the line in 2024. What a return here for Anaheim. Boston doesn't waste any time either. They make sure to lock in Lindholm on an 8-year, $52 million contract. So that's 6.5 million cap hit each season. This a lot of ways to look at this deal on both sides, Kenneth. Let's look at it from Anaheim side. Did you expect Lindholm to get this kind of return back when it came to the rumors about him? Because I could definitely have seen it first. I was a little bit surprised on the 2 seconds in there.
I think that they massively overpaid because Boston's in a situation where they really only have a couple years probably to really run this back. I know that they made the Taylor Hall move last year, but they've still got Marchand, Pasternak, and Bergeron, which when you get into the playoffs, that top line alone, we've seen that they can win a series. So bringing in Lindholm gives them more on the defensive side of things. Like the only guys that I like on their back end would have been McAvoy and DeBrusque, and so now them adding Lindholm, I think is big for them. So I just think it was a massive overpay, and clearly they loved him. That's why they locked him in for 8 years, 52. But that's a lot of draft capital to give up, especially that 2022 first this year. We know that it's not a great draft class, but I mean, now you're giving up a second next year, second the year after. So if it doesn't work this year, because we know that Boston is currently sitting in that wild card spot, if they're first rounded out, then they really don't have a lot to do in the draft. And so they're going to have to probably build through free agency in the offseason. So I think it's a great move for Anaheim. You get a first, even though it's not a great draft, you still get a first round pick. If your scouts do their job, then you'll find a talent there. So I think it's a great move for Anaheim.
Yeah, and I think with Anaheim here, one thing they could use this first for is to maybe even acquire a guy in the offseason that they might have their eye on.
Yeah.
Like I think the thing with first round picks is that it doesn't always need to be used. That they can subsequently use it in a deal if there's a defenseman that ends up coming on the market that Anaheim's like, oh, we want to get that guy on our team. So I think that could end up being valuable, and having an extra first round pick in the arsenal doesn't hurt at all. I'm with you. I think Boston, I think they're feeling a little bit of pressure with this core because I believe Patrice Bergeron's contract is up in this offseason. You have Marchand and Pasternak who are still there. Like you said, Charlie McAvoy. I think there's slight regret on Boston's part for letting Torrey Krug go a couple years back because we've always said that the blue line hasn't been the same since their last Stanley Cup final appearance. So I think they felt the pressure to add a blue liner. Then again, I thought second line center was really the big need on this team, but they instead go with the blue line. I do personally like Lindholm a lot. I think he's a really good player. I think some people have been doubting his defense recently, but the thing is that he's always paired in Anaheim. I think they paired him a lot with Drysdale, and while Drysdale offensively is a great young talent,
he's terrible defensively.
Exactly. So Lindholm kind of suffered there. So if you put him next to a pretty good defender on his line in Boston, I think he's going to end up being just fine. It's going to help that goaltending situation in Boston as well. And I think that's the only way Boston's going to have a chance in the playoffs to make a series competitive is the defense. Yes, that top line is lethal, but we do have questions about their offensive depth. And I think if you can make the other team's job to score, the other team's ability to score a bit tougher, I think that gives you a more, not an advantage per se, but it gives you more of an edge in a series. It makes you more competitive per se. So I think that was a relatively decent deal. You lose that draft capital, which does suck, But I think it's like you said, they're just going all in, and sometimes when you go all in, that's what this takes. Speaking of going all in, Kenneth, this was the final team, and we know this team is going all in because they want to finally overcome their playoff demons. Toronto isn't the only team in the Eastern Conference with playoff demons. This team indeed has them as well. For Toronto, it's Boston, and for Florida, it's Tampa Bay. And how are they going to get past Tampa Bay? Well, they're going to hope that these two deals that they've made will help with that. We're going to start off with the Ben Sherratt trade. Sherratt was a highly valued commodity for Montreal, a guy who plays relatively well defensively. He's not, outstanding, but again, I talked about it before. If blue liners that could fill out your top four for a playoff run are becoming a highly valued asset that teams will be willing to give up capital for. And that is exactly what the Florida Panthers did. They gave up prospect Ty Smilanic, gave up a 4th-round pick this year, and a 1st-rounder for next year. That has a lot of conditions on it. Not going to read through all that because their other trade that they made also has conditions on the 1st-round pick. But Kenneth, I'm going to throw this first trade to you really fast because, of course, the other deal's the big one. We're going to save that for last. Ben Sherratt, obviously, there was a lot of rumors on where he could have gone. A lot of different teams came up in the convo. I know Toronto definitely came up in the conversation for Sherratt throughout a lot of the season, but it ends up being Florida winning this sweepstakes. How much do you think Sherratt's going to help out that Florida blue line? Because I think one thing that you could say from their Tampa series last year is that their blue line definitely let them down.
Yeah, it definitely has. I think that's been their weakness for the last number of years because Florida's that team that no one ever talks about, but they're always consistently good. Like they have Huberdeau and Barkov, who are two guys that almost never get talked about in the elite players discussion. And they've been phenomenal, especially Huberdeau this year, 86 points in 62 games. So the blue line has been the weakness. I think it hasn't helped out Bobrovsky on the back end because he's been a great goalie once again this year for them. That's why I struggle with why Florida's had the playoff struggles because teams like Toronto, we know they don't have great goaltending, so it's not going to work out well for them. Same with Edmonton, but they've had good goaltending. They've had scoring. What's hurt them is the back end. So them getting a guy like Sherratt, I think it's huge for them. I know that they conditionally give up their 1st-round pick, but if you're going to win the cup this year like you think you are, then it's going to be the 31st pick or 30th pick in the draft. So I don't think it's going to hurt them that much next year. Overall, I think it's a great move for them. I really do. I think it helps them out so much.
Yeah, and I think, you think of that Tampa playoff series, the one thing you could say about Florida, and I think Tampa still would have won, even if things were a little different, but they did miss Aaron Ekblad in that playoff series last year. Now they have him back healthy this year. He's playing well. You add a Ben Sherratt to that blue line. Sergei Bobrovsky, he has struggled at times, but I think it's easy to say this is his best season in Florida so far. And if you can get a really good blue line in front of him, you definitely give him a better chance to compete in the playoffs, especially against Tampa Bay. He's beaten Tampa Bay in a playoff series before. So that's a big deal. And another big deal that they're going to hope that this guy with all his experience can help finally put them over the edge. Claude Giroux, the Philadelphia Flyers captain, recently played his 1,000th game. Philadelphia made sure that he played it in that uniform, which was, again, I like to see good class acts. That was a very good thing. I'm sure Philly was going to keep him there at least for game 1,000 no matter what. But when he did get the silver stick, it was like very nice. He gets that moment, and then it's like sayonara, bye-bye. The Panthers get Giroux, a 5th-round pick a couple years down the line, and also 2 prospects back, but we don't care about those guys. It's Claude Giroux, baby. They get Claude Giroux from the Philadelphia Flyers for Owen Tippett, a 3rd-round pick in 2023, and a 1st-round pick in 2024 that also has conditions surrounding it. So a lot of conditional picks being sent out by Florida here. Obviously, Kenneth, we know that Giroux is going to make a massive impact here. But can we just dunk on Chuck Fletcher a little bit for the Philadelphia Flyers? Because this was not the return I expected. Were you kind of in the same boat as me, Kenneth, where you would have thought Claude Giroux would have demanded a little bit more back, especially with like what Hampus Lindholm got back, what Brendan Hagel got for Chicago? Like, did the return kind of stump you a little bit?
I thought at the very least they wouldn't have to retain 50% of his salary. Like Giroux making over $8 million a year, and you still have to retain half of it. You give up a 5th-rounder yourself, and then all you really get back is Owen Tippett, who I'm not crazy about, 2023 3rd and 2024 1st, which if it's top 10, then they don't get it until 2025. Yeah, they definitely should have got more back, at the very least more draft picks back. And I mean, hey, I consider this a steal for Florida. You're putting Giroux now with all that talent that we talked about earlier. Like, I firmly believe that until you beat the champ, like, you can't be the favorite. And so that's
Agreed.
why I would still have Tampa Bay there, especially with the moves they made. But Florida, to me, is that second team. They're the team that can really challenge them, which is crazy given they're in the same division. Like, the Atlantic is just an absolute dogfight right now. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a great move for Florida. It gives them real cup aspirations because they hadn't made enough moves for me to say, okay, this year's going to be different. Adding a guy like Giroux and Sherratt, it really shows that they're all in on this core. And I think it would go a long way for the NHL too. If you get a win for a different Florida team, I think it goes a long way in drawing more support in that area as well.
Especially because I think Florida's had some new arena plans in the bank for a while here, and if and if they can have a better arena,
You
like
win
at
the
least for
cup,
fans to
that
go
arena
to.
gets built.
Oh
That's the
yeah,
way that it is.
oh yeah, 1,000%. Which is probably why Arizona will never get that new arena properly built.
Well, no,
Well,
they
then
get
they
a
also
new
don't.
arena. It's just a college arena that they have to go and play in now because that's the state of the Arizona Coyotes. And for whatever reason, the NHL said, yeah, we're still going to stick it out in Arizona. And it's like, it doesn't work there. Like, you need to
It's
move this to somewhere else. Like, even if it's another Canadian city, like, holy cow, this is brutal.
I'm putting it down right now that Kenneth will be back on in the future. Kenneth will talk about this on your podcast. We need to do an episode just on the Arizona Coyotes debacle because it's just
Oh, my God.
fascinating what has happened there. We may be able to make like a mini doc about that. But
Shane Doan might be the greatest player of all time for having to play in Arizona for as long as he did and still be successful. So I'm
right,
all in on the Shane Doan as the GOAT of hockey.
right, yeah. Mount Rushmore: Wayne Gretzky, Bobby Orr, Mario Lemieux, Shane Doan.
Shane
I think
Doan's
it's fair.
there for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. But I'm 100% with you on your analysis on Drew. I definitely think Philly could have gotten more back. I think this is a sign that Chuck Fletcher is out of here after the season's over, and that organization just needs a top to bottom purge of those that have importance. And I
That
think
was like
they
the
need a
move
reset.
that you make where, like, if it's your last day at a job and like you really don't care what happens after you leave and you're just like, yeah, sure, just give us a couple picks and like a prospect or something, and then that's all well and good, and then he leaves and everyone else is like, what the hell did you just do? Like,
Right. And he's done that before. You know, he left Minnesota with those Parisian Suter contracts. So Chuck Fletcher's a hell of a man. But ultimately, Claude Giroux, what I really like about this, Kenneth, is that even though Florida has made the playoffs a couple times, they haven't advanced past the first round yet. Like, and they've been unlucky. They got unlucky against the Islanders way back when. They've gotten unlucky the fact that they've had to face the Tampa Bay Lightning in the recent runs. I think this is big to get both Chirot, who just made it to the Stanley Cup final a year ago, and Claude Giroux, who has gone on deep playoff runs. I'm almost certain he was on that 2010 Philadelphia team that ended up going to the Stanley Cup final that faced the Blackhawks. Like, they got guys here who know what it takes to move on, to survive and advance in the playoffs. And I think for those guys to really be an example to the rest of those players, I think that's big. And just Drew's talent, like you said, you could put him with either on the same line as Huberdeau or Barkov because sometimes they get separated onto different lines. Like, and Drew's also flexible. Like, he's played center, of course, throughout a majority of his career, but he's kind of been a winger as well at times the last couple of years in Philly. So this is just all around a complete, flexible asset that they got, a guy who can really play anywhere in that top six, which I think if you're going to compete with Tampa, like, your top six needs to be guns a-blazing. Claude Giroux helps there. He's tough as well. He's throw the body around. Like, he's not a captain that, he'll sit back. He'll fight a guy. He'll get in a fight. So I think it was, top to bottom, an amazing NHL trade deadline. I was a little bit worried, Ken, in like the last 24, 36 hours, like, dang, is no move going to happen? And then we got move after move after move. So I'm highly grateful for it. And I think we are set up here, Kenneth, for a very good third act of the season going into the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I think this year's Stanley Cup playoffs have a lot of stories and have a lot of interest going into it. And we can ask for nothing better as hockey fans.
definitely. I think that there's a lot of good teams. It's just teams that get hot at the right time. Like, we talked about it on my show a little while ago. Who's the goalie that's going to take a team on a run this year? I think we both like the Rangers potentially as one of those teams, but there's a lot of teams with good goaltending, good forwards, good defensive play, and I think it's all going to be matchup based come playoff time, and that's what makes the NHL playoffs so exciting.
Yep, and that's what's going to make the end of the regular season exciting because nothing is set in stone yet, and that's the best thing you can ask for going into the final portions of your season. But that concludes our NHL trade deadline talk here on the pod this week. But we're not done yet, ladies and gentlemen. Our fearless leader, the man who leads this ship on a weekly basis, Chris, there's more.
Oh, there is more. Yeah, masterful job, Jurg and Kenneth. Y'all killed that. All right, we move on over to the NFL, where, we are picking up where we left off, and just a plethora of chaos occurred. A plethora of chaos, movement everywhere. I just blockbuster after blockbuster after blockbuster. Probably the craziest NFL offseason uh possibly ever. I don't know, but to me it was. Yeah, so we're gonna go over four specific trades. We're gonna go one by one. I think we should start off with the lighter one, and then we could just progress into the more chaotic ones. um Matt Ryan to the Colts for a 2022 third round pick. um yeah, the Colts get their quarterback, and it's not Baker Mayfield. So, Dame, let me start off with you. Initial thoughts on the trade, thoughts on the trade package, and what do you make of it for both teams?
I know we talked about it either last week or 2 weeks ago. How like the Colts, we didn't know. I didn't know what they were doing personally when they traded Carson Wentz because I don't know what other options they really had, besides Jimmy Garoppolo, and I don't know what's going on with Jimmy Garoppolo's market. Um, but clearly they found themselves an option better than Baker Mayfield. Like no one really wants Baker Mayfield at this point. So getting a guy like Matt Ryan who's been to the Super Bowl, he's won an MVP. Obviously, he's not the same MVP quarterback he used to be, but he's still pretty viable and better than a lot of other starting quarterbacks in the league. So for the Colts, I think it's a really good move. You're bringing an established veteran in there instead of bringing like a second or third round rookie like they probably would have if they didn't get Matt Ryan because they don't have a first round pick this year. So bring a guy like that in that has been in the league for a while. He probably knows the offense a little bit. Putting him in there, he's not going to make mistakes. He's not going to lose you games. He's not going to go out there and throw for 400 yards, 4 touchdowns, and win you a game. But with the system they have in place there, where it's mostly just giving the ball to Jonathan Taylor and letting him work behind that, the best offensive line in the league, in my opinion, and really just giving that defense enough offense that they can win games because that defense takes the ball away a lot. So Matt Ryan and that Colts offense is going to have a lot of opportunities to score and possess the ball. So for the Colts, I definitely do really like it. I think they are probably the best team in their division, if not second, with the Titans. It's kind of neck and neck in my opinion. As for the compensation, is a third round pick. Like I think that's probably where he should have, like what his value is, a third round pick. I don't know if it's at the beginning or the end. It's probably towards the end. But oh no, they got 2/3 for Carson Wentz. So use one of them for Matt Ryan. You have extra third round pick left over, and I don't see a big difference between Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz as QBs. So to me, I think this is an absolute win for the Colts.
Yeah, let me move on over to Kenneth. What do you think about this trade?
Indy was in a really tough spot because right now trying to win in the AFC is so tough given all the other moves that were made this offseason and teams re-upping, and especially teams who missed the playoffs last year that can now move up into the playoffs with some of the moves they've made. So Indy was in a tough spot. They obviously couldn't keep Wentz. The fan base turned on him. So moving him to the Commanders, I don't think that's a big loss for them. Bringing in Matt Ryan, yeah, I think they're comparable, him and Wentz. I think Matt Ryan keeps the defense a little bit more honest than Wentz did because it felt like down the stretch, teams were like, no, we're going to stop Jonathan Taylor as much as we can, and we're going to force Wentz to win the game. I think he struggled to do that a bit. I don't think that's going to be the case with Matt Ryan. I think if you put the game in his hands, he's a lot more of a veteran QB that's played in a lot bigger games. And so I think he can deliver in that regard. He still doesn't have great weapons in Indy. So I'm curious to see what they actually do the rest of the offseason, because if they're relying on T.Y. Hilton to go back to what he was, I just don't see that happening given his injury history. Then you've got Michael Pittman, who was a solid wide receiver one last year for them, but they need to add something. And whether it's a slot receiver or guys like Jarvis Landry who are on the market, just bring in a second guy so it doesn't just all fall on Pittman to go and win the game for them. I think it goes a long way. But yeah, Indy's in a tough spot. Like they have to win the division, I think, in order to get into the playoffs, because with all these other good teams, I think this is a one team division as far as playoffs go. So I think it's a good move for Indy to at least keep pace with Tennessee.
Jurg, yeah. Initial thoughts on the trade, thoughts on the trade package, and what would you make of it for both teams?
Good old boy Matty Ice. Matty Ice. What a good man. Um, I kind of fell for the guy because I think more and more we're starting to see now in the NFL it's hard for guys to stay on a team for their entire careers. And it looked like it was going down to being the case for Matt Ryan. I wouldn't have been surprised if maybe if he was still a Falcon, I think that you could probably say that this was going to be his last year in the league or next year, whenever his contract would have been done. I think that would have been it. But now he's going to be with Indy. With the Matt Ryan to the Colts, I think this is just another stopgap move. I don't blame the Colts looking back. Like, again, I'm in the camp that I don't think Carson Wentz was as bad as people tried to portray him as. I think it was specific games and specific missteps that ultimately cost him his job in Indy. And when you have that, you need to go after a guy that you can hope you hope that you're able to get the best out of him. And I think Frank Reich can help get the best out of Matt Ryan. We've seen a little bit. Now, it's not necessarily that Matt Ryan's been bad the last couple of years. It's just he's gotten older. But now you're going to a team with Jonathan Taylor on it, with that defense who has some players on it. They need to improve a little bit. I think that defensive backfield, especially because they traded Rock Ya-Sin for Yannick Ngakoue, there's still some fixes there. And I think Kenneth, and I'm sure Dane both pointed out, like the wide receiving core needs a little bit. While I do like a Michael Pittman Jr., I think if he's your second or third most reliable option or best option, I think that'd be even better. So if they could try to get one more receiving threat in there, that'd be big. But I think overall, if you are the Indianapolis Colts, Matt Ryan is a good option for what was out there, I think. And I think he'll definitely help this team. The big hope is that they could beat Tennessee at this point, which I hate the fact that that needs to be the standard in the AFC South, because I've expressed my Tennessee Titans opinion a number of times on this show and other podcasts I've been on. But I think it was a good move by Indy to get him the package. I mean, they didn't have to give up much, and Atlanta is taking on a lot of the salary still. Like, they have a dead cap hit because of this trade for Matt Ryan. So I'm not going to call it a absolute W per se, because I think there are some performance things and him being older, but I think this was a good deal for the Colts to make to get a stopgap quarterback in there for the next year or two while they try to find a way to see how they're going to get the next quarterback in, whether it be this year, next year, or another year down the line even.
All right. Well, speaking of quarterbacks, the Cleveland Browns officially have their new quarterback, not Jacoby Brissett. No, I'm going to credit that joke to Jurg. Technical difficulties. I'm taking advantage of Money in the Bank cash in. Their new quarterback, Deshaun Watson. What a blockbuster of a trade. Jeez. I mean, all right. Let's talk about the package here. The Browns receive quarterback Deshaun Watson and a 2024 fifth-round pick. The Texans receive a 2022 and 2023 first-round pick, a 2023 third-round pick, and a 2024 first and fourth-round pick. So a total of 5 picks for the Texans in exchange for Deshaun Watson as he goes to the Browns. Yeah, huge blockbuster. I think Deshaun Watson re-signed for 5 years, $230 million after this trade was announced. So anarchy everywhere. The Texans get a serviceable package, to say the least. Yeah, and the Browns replace Baker Mayfield. So, Jurg, let me start off with you on this one. Yeah, so initial reaction, thoughts on the trade package, specifically what the Texans got, and yeah, what do you make of it for both teams? I mean, I think all of us could agree that for the Texans, it's a rebuilding situation. So, I guess what does this mean more for the Browns? How do you like it for the Browns?
So this was wild. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this broke I the same day or within 24 hours of when the Devontae Adams stuff broke.
Maybe.
And it was absolutely insane when you think about it. Just because the thing is, just like a day or two before, and I would know this because at work it was talked about, the fact that the Browns were out of the running for Deshaun Watson. It was said that Deshaun Watson didn't want to go to a cold weather city like that.
Money talks.
That's not even a joke. I was just about to get to that. Like, he didn't want to go to a cold weather city at first because when you think about it, like where he played football in high school, in college, and the start of his pro career, he didn't want to go to a cold weather city. So it was coming down to Atlanta and New Orleans. But I don't know if it was the Texans and Deshaun's camp themselves or if the Browns went back to them. I don't know who started the last middle line of communication, but the Browns essentially, gave Deshaun Watson an offer he couldn't refuse. And boys, when you get an offer that you can't refuse, when you get the Godfather offer, it's either you accept it or your kneecaps get cut off. and for Deshaun Watson, and maybe the Browns were going to go against him in his case. Who knows? Ultimately, the Browns said, "Let's make you the highest paid quarterback of all time. Not only that, your base salary this year will only be $1 million. So, if he does get suspended this year for his past transgressions, that comes out of the base salary, that suspension." And when Deshaun Watson was told that, he's like, "Sign me up for that." That man said, "Cleveland cold, I could deal with that for half the year if you're going to pay me that much." Which I think it kind of makes sense that it would you got to pay someone $200 million to willingly want to go to Cleveland, Ohio at the end of the day, and Ohio in general. So it kind of makes sense from a logical perspective. But for the Texans, I think all of us, we're not going to spend too much time on it. The 3 extra first round picks, it really all depends on this first one, how many games Deshaun plays in, and then in the next 2, how good the team is still around him and how competitive they're really going to be. But ultimately, it's just extra draft capital for the Texans, which they've sorely needed after a couple drafts there where they didn't have a lot to work with. For the Browns, this is the quarterback that they've been waiting for. Funny enough, the year that Deshaun Watson was taken in the league, I believe Houston had to trade up for that pick, if I'm not mistaken. And I almost want to say that the team they traded up with, or the team they traded up in front of, was the Browns. I know because whenever it comes to Browns quarterbacks, like the Deshaun Watson deal, like the trade up by Houston to get Deshaun always gets brought up as like they could have had Deshaun had that trade not happened, or potentially it had him. So they get him this time later in his prime, at his peak, if he's playing, which he is in his prime. He is a top 5 quarterback in this game. That is without question. No one blames him for the poor performance that Houston had going back to the 2020 season, because they knew that Bill O'Brien ruined that roster. Deshaun Watson is clearly a guy who he's going to make those receivers look good. They still got to fix up that receiving core a little bit, of course, with the purge that they have. But Amari Cooper, who they got for literally nothing, I think you put him with a guy like a Deshaun Watson, as good as Dak Prescott is, I think Dak is not that bad. Deshaun Watson is better. I'm taking Deshaun Watson over Dak Prescott. So there's that. Donovan Peoples-Jones as a deep threat. You have a guy who can uncork a football 50-plus yards. And they're probably going to try to get late in the game here on one of these receivers that could still be on the market. If not, this wide receiver class in this draft is not too bad. So they could I think they could get a real difference maker in the second and or third round. So at the end of the day here, I think for Cleveland, this is the franchise quarterback that they've been waiting on since they came back to the league 2 decades ago. This is the kind of quarterback that they have wanted to get in there to finally be like, okay, now we're a contender again. And that defense played pretty well last year. If the Browns, there were a couple games, man, where if they just did a little bit better, they could have made the playoffs. And now, and I do kind of feel bad for Baker because he played through an injury, and I don't think a lot of people are going to give him enough credit. Like, normally guys get given credit for playing through injury, especially like me and Kenneth being hockey guys. We always give guys credit, especially when it comes to the playoffs, for playing through the injuries they play through. Baker tried to do that, and everyone's just making fun of him for it. So I do feel bad for Baker, but even if he was 100% healthy at the peak, Baker Mayfield or Deshaun Watson, yeah, it's Deshaun by a mile. So from a purely on the field perspective, this is an absolute W for the Browns. However many games he ends up playing this year, if he's healthy down the line, if he's still good, because it's been a while since he played, he's going to dominate. Like, he's going to be great in there, I think, especially with the running game they have to help balance it out with Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Hunt can especially catch out the backfield. I think it's absolutely outstanding when it comes to the Browns from the on-the-field side. Off the field, however, that's already been a little bit of a PR issue, to say the very least, and how things have been handled. But we are not necessarily the most well-equipped in terms of terminology and all that to break that down sufficiently. So we're focusing on the on-the-field. And what I will say is that it is a on-the-field W for Cleveland as of now. Will that translate? We shall see. But they got what they wanted. They didn't want Baker Mayfield anymore, and they got their guy. They also got Jacoby Brissett too, which Jacoby Brissett, real locker room guy. He's a vocal guy in the locker room. I think he's a good backup, situational quarterback for them as well. Don't sleep on Jacoby Brissett.
No, we will not. Dame, let me go to you next. What do you think about this?
Well, I don't know if you guys see on ESPN about the Deshaun Watson thing, how there's another charge that could be brought against him. So,
wow,
Brown's gonna Brown, right? Cleveland's gonna Cleveland. But at the end of the day, this is a trade that the Cleveland Browns are gonna make. Like, no matter what accusations this guy has against him, like, the Browns are gonna do it. Like, they never even spoke with his lawyer to like clear up stuff. Just as long as he got cleared by whatever courts he got cleared by, or whatever criminal allegations were dropped against him, they're like, okay, it's over. It's over with. He's cleared. Let's sign him to the biggest contract ever and guarantee his entire salary or whatever, and just protect him no matter what. Like no other team was gonna do that. It's just Cleveland is what they are. That's why they've been piss poor their entire lives. But for the Texans, I think it's great. They got three first round picks or three, right?
Wait, say it again.
They got 3 first round picks for Watson, right?
I
Texans?
believe, was it 2? Let me check. Actually, hold
I,
up. They
I
got
think it's
three
three.
first. Yeah.
Three, and it's Russell Wilson was 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for the Texans getting 3 first round picks, and this year I believe it's the 13th pick in the draft, so that's pretty good. And you already have your third overall pick, so having 3 and 13 is going to be really good. Whether you want to go QB or you just want to build the team around until you want to wait till next year's QB draft, which is a lot stronger. And you just build a team around it with the picks you have now. Or you just getting rid of Deshaun Watson and that whole distraction, him wanting out, and then all these criminal charges. So for the Texans, I think it's really good. Get rid of all that money as well. You don't have to pay him all that kind of money. Getting all the draft capital you need after you really lost a lot of draft capital with the Dolphins after trading for Laramie Tunsil, and that kind of set your franchise back a couple years. But now they're really going to go through a full rebuild. They have a lot of draft capital. They have the cap space. Now they just need to build the team around the QB spot and then find that right QB to lead them in the right direction. But so yeah, for the Texans, I really like it. For the Browns, I don't know. I wouldn't have taken that risk, especially paying him all that kind of guaranteed money. Obviously, I would have explored trading for him, and I would have traded 3 first round picks for him. But to me, the bigger problem is the contract and fully guaranteeing it when you didn't even contact his lawyer to really get the full details on the entire situation. Now, as you're seeing, a whole new grand jury in Texas might be pressing even more charges against him. And guess what? The trade's done. You signed the contract. Now you're stuck with it. So it is what it is, and I'm just not surprised it was Cleveland who made this move this quick.
Kenneth?
I mean, I'm the complete opposite of Jurg, where I actually don't feel bad for Baker Mayfield at all. I think he's super arrogant, and I think that just because he played through an injury doesn't mean that he would have been any good if he didn't have the injury. So I actually don't feel bad for him at all, and I think he will end up on a team this year. He'll probably start for a team, but it's strictly because other teams, like basically the entire NFC South outside of Tom Brady, needs a quarterback, because I don't consider Jameis a good quarterback either. But I mean, Cleveland had to make this move. They had all these win now guys. Like, you don't make that Amari Cooper trade unless you actually were going to go and get a quarterback. And Deshaun Watson, he was the best quarterback available despite the legal situation. I actually think the Jacoby Brissett move was smart too, because just because Deshaun could potentially dodge any like jail time and that doesn't mean that he won't miss football games. So Jacoby's a good backup. He'll give them a chance to maybe win a couple games. Hopefully the scheduling gods are kind to them, where early on in the year they maybe get a couple of early easier games, and then they can win a couple there with Jacoby. But yeah, Cleveland's in a situation where they have to win now. They've got guys like Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward on the defensive side of things. You've got Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt out of the backfield. And now you've got Deshaun Watson. I'd like to see them go and add another wide receiver, because as much as I like Donovan Peoples-Jones, yeah, he is more of that deep threat. I think they need more of a slot guy, and I don't really like Jakeem Grant as much. So yeah, I think it's a great move for Cleveland. Houston on the other side, yeah, they get draft picks. That's what they want. Right now, trying to win in the AFC when you don't have a quarterback that's named Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, like they're better to just not win games right now and just rebuild in 5 years' time. Maybe it looks a little bit different. Some free agencies go by, some guys move to the NFC, and then you can make a real run at contending again. But I mean, if you're not one of those, because really there's like 10 or 12 teams in the AFC that could make the playoffs next year. Houston was not going to be one of them, even if Deshaun Watson was going to return to the team. So I think it's very smart for them to just move him. Cleveland giving them all that guaranteed money. I mean, yeah, Cleveland's going to Cleveland. Let's see if it actually works out for them. If not, then we'll get comfortable watching Jacoby Brissett take more snaps while Baker Mayfield's bitter playing for some NFC team.
Yeah, and that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing at all. This is a Jacoby Brissett fan club here. Ken, let
Also,
me
like
go ahead.
Baker, if he does go to the NFC, they would have a legitimate chance at making the playoffs because with all these QB moves that have happened, there's really only like 5 or 6 teams that you look at where you're like, yeah, that's a playoff team in the NFC.
Yeah.
And then there's just a lot of question marks. So if he goes to a good team in the NFC that maybe doesn't have the QB play that they'd like and he plays well, he could have a career resurgence. I don't think it's going to happen, but if he was going to go somewhere, then the NFC would be where he should.
Yeah, the balance of power went to the AFC. Like Russell Wilson went to the AFC, Matt Ryan's in the AFC now.
Yeah.
Like
Nuclear zone.
these guys are all in the AFC. It's going to be a complete war zone out there.
It's
like Kenneth
basically
said,
just it's Rams, Packers, and Bucks, and then everyone else. Because
Yeah.
even Arizona, like I guess they're kind of like that tier 2 with Dallas. But after that, it's like wow, there's a lot of bad QB play in this conference.
Yeah. I think it's mostly just character issues at this point with him. But who knows? Who knows what'll happen? So much shit has happened that just nothing would surprise me at this point. Okay. We move on to another blockbuster trade. Davante Adams has been traded to the Las Vegas Raiders. He reunites with Derek Carr. I believe it was for a first and second round pick for the 2022 draft.
Yep.
Yeah. And then I believe Davante Adams re-signs. I think it was $28 million a year. I believe something
right.
28, something around that range. Yeah. Well, he broke like the wide receiver like
for a few days
salary. Yeah. Well, he started it. Like he opened that. He opened that bad boy up.
Christian Kirk's.
That is true.
I was gonna say, like if we're gonna talk about a deal that just absolutely opened Pandora's box of money for wide receivers in the NFL, Christian Kirk getting as much as he did. Holy cow! That's wild.
them con boys in Jacksonville. Yeah, but anyway, a blockbuster trade, to say the least. Ken, let me stick with you. What did you make of this?
I like the move for Vegas. I mean, I think that makes them like obviously everything that happened with like the Ruggs situation last year, and then you had Darren Waller was hurt a lot of the year. The fact they even made it to the playoffs was a big testament to that organization, and I think Derek Carr as well of how good of a QB that he is. So now they've got a very dangerous offense. You've got Devontae, you've got Waller, you've got Renfro in the slot, you've still got Josh Jacobs in the backfield. And I think they went out and signed Brandon Bolden, if I'm not mistaken. So that gives them another another running back there. So Vegas, I mean, they're in the toughest division in the NFL. So Devontae is going to have to play like he did with Rodgers, and obviously he has that connection with Carr. So I think it'll work out very well for them. But that's a lot of money to pay a wide receiver in the NFL, and I know that Kirk set the precedent early on in the offseason, and all these guys are like, wow, if this bum's getting this much, then I demand close to $30 million a year. And now we're seeing multiple deals that are in that range. And I mean, if Devontae is Devontae, then the Raiders are going to be a very tough team. Watching AFC West football is just going to be absolutely incredible this year. It's always going to be a must-watch game when those teams are squaring off against each other. But I like the move for Vegas because they had a decision to either rebuild or go all in. And I think going after a guy like Adams shows that they were committed to Derek Carr and moving forward with him. So I liked it for Vegas.
Yeah, I think just piggyback on what you're talking about, Ken. I think the biggest thing at the end of the day was just the fact that the Raiders had a choice here. It was we rebuild because the AFC West was going bonkers because Russell Wilson had happened. The Chargers had made that Khalil Mack trade. It was either they need to tear it down or they become players. And oh boy, did they become players with Davante Adams. And let's not forget here, because we're talking about the trades, but we're mentioning signings here and there. Chandler Jones leaving Arizona to go to Vegas. That's insane. That was next level. Kenneth, did you have the same reaction as me? It's like, dang, Arizona, you let him go. And it's like, dang, this boy's going to the AFC West as well. Because that just makes it not just a quarterback division. That makes it the pass rush division. Because now every single division there has top tier pass rushing and some great defense as well. Like you said, Ken, I think it's just going to be a complete war zone, a battle zone there out in the AFC West. I think the trade at the end of the day, reports have come out as to what happened. So really this all stems from the contract not being done last year when Adams would have wanted it to get done last season. And while the Aaron Rodgers thing has gotten better because Rodgers was actually let known, like they told him that we may not get Devontae back, he was actually cool with it, which prop to A-Rod. The fact that Devontae, the relations went so bad, I still kind of speaks to the Green Bay needs to fix things. And he said, look, I just want to play for Vegas because he is a lifelong Raiders fan, and now he gets to play with that organization. Like, hey, good for him. And he broke the bank, got the bag. And like Kenneth said, I know for a lot of people, it's always like, we always question the other positions because only quarterbacks can get paid, apparently, according to some people. But in certain situations, I think we've seen the last half decade, a top tier wide receiver can help your quarterback become even better. And I think Davante Adams is a guy, he's developed in part because of Rodgers, but in part because he just genuinely got better. If he could play even 80%, 85% of what he was in Green Bay, Derek Carr is going to look like a lot better of a quarterback. Like, I don't understand why people are so against the wide receivers. Yes, you have to pay him. Guess what? The salary cap changes things. The league changes things. The market resets. This isn't the day where only the quarterback and 2-3 other positions get paid. Anyone can get paid now. And I think Davante Adams is one of those guys where I have absolutely no problem with him getting paid because he, at his best, can really help Derek Carr look damn good here. And I think that's ultimately, at the end of the day, what they needed. Because, yes, Derek Carr, he's a nice guy. He's a good story. But I think we can all agree Derek Carr, at best, sometimes is a top 10 quarterback. But now in that division, he's become the 4th best quarterback. So they needed to add more. Hunter Renfrow is nice, but he's not spectacular. He's not game-changing. Like, he's not game-breaking. Darren Waller can be, but he got hurt a little bit last season. Davante Adams is Mr. Consistency, and the last 2 seasons, he has been top 2 wide receiver in the game. And now I think this brings the Raiders offense to a whole other level that they needed a Davante Adams type player to get to that point. I'm sorry if you don't like receivers getting paid, certain people out there, but hey, the market dictates it, and I'm happy to see it.
Yeah. Dame?
Yeah, I mean, this was extremely shocking to me. I remember I was with one of my friends, and then randomly they were like, "Oh, Davante Adams to the Raiders," and I was like, "What? No way! Like, they're just playing with me." And I went on Twitter, and it was real. It just didn't make sense to me, just based on the fact that Aaron Rodgers just decided to go back and re-sign with them, and I don't know why he would do that, knowing that Davante Adams was on his way out, because supposedly he knew that contract extension talks with Adams weren't going well, and then he was going to be out of there. So knowing that they don't spend money on weapons for Rodgers, and they don't spend draft capital on weapons for Rodgers, didn't make sense to me why he'd be okay with going back, knowing that Davante Adams is number 1 receiver, the best receiver in the league, and literally the only guy in that offense you could trust to throw the ball to each and every single time was not going to be there next year. So to me, it's very confusing why the Packers did it and why Aaron Rodgers went back. But they got a 1st and 2nd round pick for him this year. They're probably still not going to use either one of those picks to help Aaron Rodgers out. I don't know what they're going to do in that offensive end. I mean, I'm sure they're going to use one of their picks on him, but until they do, I just don't believe it's going to happen. It's kind of like prove it to me that you're going to actually go out and help your star quarterback and your franchise out. But until I see, I'm still going to kind of shit on them. But for the Raiders, on the Raiders side, obviously they needed that number 1 receiver ever since Antonio Brown went nuts, and that's the best way to describe it. He went nuts and left the team, and then obviously the whole Henry Ruggs situation, you lost another possible number 1 receiver. So they've been always just looking for that number 1 receiver to put on the outside, although they do need more than just one receiver, in my opinion. But just having that number 1 receiver that Derek Carr can trust, game in and game out, was very important for them. And what better way to go out and get a number 1 receiver than get Davante Adams? Not only is he the best wide receiver in the league, but he's Derek Carr's college teammate, and in previous years they've talked about how they've wanted to team up in the future. So here it is. Green Bay, for whatever reason, got rid of him. All they had to give up was a 1st and 2nd round pick. I think for a team like the Raiders, where you see the whole AFC, and especially their own division, the AFC West, loading up, you need to load up yourself. And what better way than bring in the best receiver in the league and the QB's college teammate in Davante Adams? Now, do I think this is going to really help them win the division? No. I still personally have them 4th in that division. I still think they're the worst team in that division. I do think they're going to make the playoffs, though, because of how many teams do make the playoffs. I think that entire division does make it. But I think this is an incredible move for them, just to put them kind of closer to a level playing field with the rest of the NFC, and especially the rest of the AFC, and especially the AFC West. You know what? With the Chiefs, you gotta fight fire with fire, and Chargers did it, the Broncos did it, now the Raiders did it. So having an offense with Derek Carr, Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, Darren Waller, that hopefully they improve that offensive line, improve that defense, and they're going to be a real force to be reckoned with. But what I saw with the Chiefs and Raiders last year, how badly the Chiefs owned them, until I see them actually play the Chiefs and become better, that's when I'm going to give them more, I guess, praise and be more hopeful for their division hopes. But overall, as this trade, I don't know what the Packers are doing personally. I can't even name their number one receiver right now. But for the Raiders, I absolutely love it because they see everyone around them getting better, and they just made the biggest move possibly in the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
I submit to you Randall Cobb as the current Packers number one wide receiver.
Wow. I mean, Green Bay deserves that. All right, yeah. Devontae Adams already bought a crib next to Derek Carr, so just shows how excited he was when he moved to Vegas. Don't blame him. Don't blame him. Finally get some warm ass weather. And that alone might be worth it after enduring just so many years in Green Bay. All right, let's move on over to the final blockbuster trade. Man, did this one take us by surprise. Guys, Tyreek Hill has been traded. To the Miami Dolphins. This one I think came out of nowhere. Tyreek Hill was due for some contract negotiations. You know, I wake up in the morning, see that the Jets are in serious talks to trade for Tyreek Hill. I'm like, oh my god, this is insane right now. And then it says the Jets and the Dolphins, and then at that point I knew it was clipped because it was up to those two, and I'm just like, we're gonna choose the Jets, we're gonna choose the Dolphins. Both of them are not necessarily the most top tier organizations, but you know, if you're gonna get paid $30 million a year, I think you'd want to do it in Miami with no state tax. So he chose the Dolphins. So Chiefs traded him to the Dolphins, and I believe so. The package is 5 draft picks in total, a 2022 first round pick, which is the 29th pick, a 2022 second round pick, a 2022 fourth round pick, and 2023 fourth and sixth round picks. So yeah, all that for Tyreek Hill. Oof. All right. Dame, let me start off with you on this one. What did you make of this? I know us as Jets fans, we were heartbroken that he didn't come to the Jets, but honestly, kind of expected because you know dudes are just gonna choose that city life in Miami. Of course, it's a big reason. It's actually a huge reason. But yeah, initial thoughts on the trade. Thoughts on the package that the Chiefs got, and what do you make of this for both sides, and especially for the Chiefs going forward?
I'm gonna just start off with the whole Jets point of view. I was at the gym working out, and my workout took like 4 hours because I was just constantly refreshing Twitter to see what's going on, if the trade's going down or whatever. Um, I was at first shocked that Tyreek Hill was on the trade block because just like the Packers, the Chiefs are obviously in win now mode and they have a superstar QB, and just wouldn't make sense for you to get rid of your number one receiver. And especially with Mahomes and Hill, that's such a perfect combo for their skill sets. It didn't make sense to me. But just seeing that the Jets were involved, that didn't surprise me because you see Joe Douglas, the way Joe Douglas has been operating this offseason, all these free agent contracts, he's kind of backloaded them, and all these the heavier cap hits of these contracts have been for 2-3 years down the line. And for this year specifically, the cap hits have been really low. So a lot of people are thinking that he was gearing up for a big move and looking to add a big impactful player with a heavier cap hit. And no one knew what this was. But then you see Tyreek Hill on the move, and then you see, boom, the Jets are seriously involved with it. But then when I saw the Dolphins involved with it too, and that them and the Jets are the final two teams in on it, my hopes kind of went down because I knew Miami was probably a better situation for him. Obviously, you have the better weather. Obviously, they're probably a better team right now than the Jets are, and Tyreek Hill trains down there and is from there, so all signs pointed to him going to the Dolphins. But I still had hope that somehow, some way, he would have picked the Jets. And then I saw that the Chiefs accepted both the Jets and Dolphins offers, and it'll all come down to Tyreek Hill. And then I was like, yeah, he's gonna go to the Dolphins. If it comes down to the Chiefs accepting both offers, he's gonna pick the Dolphins one way or another because the Jets aren't at a point where they're a team that a superstar player can go to even though the weather sucks, the location sucks, the team, the color sucks, the stadium suck, everything sucks about them. But at this point, the Jets still do suck. They're not organizations say say the Chiefs. The Chiefs aren't in a great location either. Who the hell wants to live in Kansas City? But at the end of the day, they have Patrick Mahomes and they're championship contender each and every single year. The Jets aren't at that point right now where they can overcome their geographical downfalls.
Shortcomings, sure, yeah.
Yeah, whatever. But they're not at that point yet, like the Dolphins are with their good weather and stuff. So I knew it was gonna be the Dolphins at the end of the day. But then I wasn't as disappointed when it happened. But then when I really thought about it and saw what the Chiefs accepted from the Jets, and it was just both second round picks, and the Jets could have had the 4th overall pick and the 10th overall pick, and still got Tyreek Hill. That just made me really, really sad because that really could have been a game changer, not only for Zach Wilson, but his entire franchise moving forward. But now just going back to the trade, I think it's amazing for the Dolphins. You pair Tyreek Hill with Jalen Waddle, quite possibly the 2 fastest guys in the entire league. You're giving Tua Tagovailoa the best possible options to succeed. You already added Teron Armstead at left tackle, one of the best left tackles in the league. Now you're giving him all the weapons to be successful. And now you're really going to see what he's about. A lot of people are saying he hasn't really exploded because of the weapons and the coaching and stuff, but now he has everything he possibly needs to really take that next step. The Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Mike Gesicki, all these running backs they signed from Chase Edmonds. They have Myles Gaskin. Obviously, Teron Armstead. They signed Connor Williams as well. So you have all the makings of that like really explosive offense moving forward. So I'm really excited to see what they're about. I'm not excited to see them play the Jets twice a year. The Jets really better be going after a cornerback in this draft because if not, it's going to be a long, long day when they have to play the Miami Dolphins. So obviously for the Dolphins, I love it. For the Chiefs, again, like I mentioned with the Packers, it just doesn't make sense why you get rid of your number 1 receiver when you have your superstar quarterback in his prime, and obviously Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. So I'm sure he's going to be all right, but we saw that offense struggle last year when either Kelsey or Hill were out because you could just double one of them and then you don't have anything else on the outside. And I don't want to get started on Juju Smith-Schuster because he's awful in my opinion. He's not going to be a difference maker for this team. So really all Patrick Mahomes now has is Travis Kelsey. Obviously, they have 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, so a lot can happen. And they have a lot of cap space now because they got rid of Tyreek Hill. So it's going to be interesting to see what they add on that offense because they do need speed. But hopefully they don't go the Packers route and actually help out their quarterback and give him weapons to be successful. But for the Chiefs, it's still a head scratcher because of how well Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes connected and gelled together. But for the Dolphins, I absolutely love it. It's a home run.
Jurg?
Yeah, no, it's again, this is another thing where it's like a lot of people criticizing the Dolphins here, but I think what this is that this is the true test of is Tua the guy. And now he has Jalen Waddle, he has Tyreek Hill, he has Mike Gesicki. He's got with McDaniels there. Now it's all about assuming the running back crew is going to do well because the offensive line gets better with Armstead. And he's a master. You know, he comes from the Kyle Shanahan tree of we will run the ball down your throat no matter who the running back is. Like the offense is now set up to where Tua, this is pass or fail here. And I hate to put that expectation because I really do feel for Tua. Like I think he had a delayed start. I think the lack of offensive coordinator consistency really hurt him. And this is going to be his first year with McDaniel. But I think this is a big indicator on what is Tua's future with the team going to be like. And ultimately, it's going to come up to how well can they use Tyreek Hill. I think Tyreek Hill will play well. It's just can Tua show us the potential that he showed when he was in college. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. The thing with Dame's point is that while I don't like the fact that Green Bay and Casey had to do this, again, the market dictates, like we've said and joked about here, in all seriousness, Christian Kirk's contract broke the league. Like, just imagine when A.J. Brown and Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase
Cooper
have to
Kupp?
come up for their contract. Cooper Kupp, when his contract is up. Like, these guys are going to demand bank from their teams because it's like, how much is he getting paid? Okay, he's never had 1,000 yards. Like, this is the thing. Christian Kirk has never had a 1,000-yard season. Tyreek Hill's had like 3 or 4 seasons of over 1,200 yards. He's like a 5 or 6 time Pro Bowler. He's made the All-Pro team like 2-3 times. He's a Super Bowl champion. Like, he has the resume to warrant the contract. And look, money talks, money dictates everything. And this is what elite top tier receiver money's like. I can only imagine if Stephon Diggs is gonna throw a stink now in over in Buffalo, because he's like, excuse me, a couple of years ago when I came here, Josh Allen started playing really well, and when I was injured last year, he didn't look great always. So can I get my money, please, and thank you? Like, this is going to set off a chain reaction here, and Hill and Adams are just the first two. It would have been nice if Green Bay and Casey could have worked it out. I think especially more so Green Bay, because they were in the process of resetting everything with the Rodgers deal. But I think, again, the relationship deteriorated there, and Adams just wanted to leave. And here, I think it's just a case of Mahomes, Kelsey, Chris Jones, probably some other pieces that either they're going to bring in or like they need to make plans for. Like they need to extend Orlando Brown Jr. because they only franchise tagged him. Like for Kansas City, Tyreek Hill is just the guy where it's like, we can't pay you and you have to go somewhere else. And it sucks because he is so dynamic. I think the Chiefs are going to be fine. I think they're going to use at least one, like Dame said, both of them and the Packers with 4 picks in the first 2 rounds. I think 2 of those picks are going to be on pass catchers for both those teams. And again, this is a pretty deep wide receiver class, especially like there are 5, according to McShane Kuiper, there's like 5 or 6 first round caliber receivers potentially of varying skill sets. So you just got to get the right one there. Unlike Dame, I will venture to say I think Juju is going to be decent with Kansas City. I think Kelsey is the number 1, Juju and the rookie sharing the 2 and 3 back-to-back. We'll see if they could develop Mecole Hardman, because remember, when they drafted Mecole Hardman, he was going to be their new Tyreek Hill, because that was A, before Tyreek Hill had developed into what he currently is, and B, it's when there were some like off-the-field situations where they thought they were going to lose Tyreek Hill. So all that put together, it sucks. I think Kansas City is going to be just fine with Patrick Mahomes there at the end of the day. That being said, I don't think this is a loss for Miami because Tua is not Patrick Mahomes. Like I think people are misunderstanding here. Like they're like, you don't pay that kind of money to a wide receiver. You only pay that to the quarterback and like maybe 1 or 2. No, you need to understand is that in this league, you're either going to win. You don't always win with the superstar quarterback, and we've seen in recent Super Bowls like you can get to that point without your quarterback being a superstar. So if you can get the next 2 years to see if Tua is really good, like let's be real here. Right now, Tua would not demand a big contract, and if you have to hit a reset button with a new rookie quarterback or maybe a veteran who's still a pretty cheap deal, like then you hit the reset, and it's like let's get a new rookie in here on a 5-year cheap deal. Like I can kind of see why people are against it, but this is to lead the Dolphins offense, and Tyreek Hill is so dynamic. He's proven to be so good, and he's in his prime. I think this is the right kind of deal for the Dolphins to make. I know people are going to complain, but let's be real here. Like all the picks you said, Chris, like 1st round picks, 2nd round picks, 4th round picks, like yeah, man, some of them end up being pretty well. And like, I know the value of the cheap contract, but how many of those guys are going to be better than Tyreek Hill? Of those 5 draft pick Kansas City got, how many of them are realistically going to be equal to or better than Tyreek Hill? Like, let's be real. And then is it going to be because those guys are good, or is it because that team is good? Is it because Patrick Mahomes is good? If their rookie receiver gets 900 yards, would he have gotten that if Patrick Mahomes wasn't his quarterback? Would he have gotten that if Tua was? So it's like it's a whole back and forth. I understand it, but at the end of the day, I get why the Dolphins did this. They need to help Tua. Tua is a quarterback that needs the help. We've seen teams reach the Super Bowl the last couple of years where their quarterback isn't top tier, but everything around them is really good, including that. So at the end of the day, I did like this deal because I think for Miami, it's signaling some things. Is the contract great? Not ideal, but again, this is what the market dictates, and I'm not going to complain about it because I'm all for guys getting paid. I absolutely love to see it. Um, like Dame said, Jets, Patriots, Bills, they kind of have to worry. This was really a deal to match up to the Bills because the Bills have smoked the Dolphins the last like 3 or 4 times they faced off. So this is a deal to be like, hey, we still want to be players in the AFC because they need to be, because man, the wild card, at least 2 of those wild card spots are going to the AFC West. So that means 1 more wild card spot's available. You had to make this deal if you're Miami. You had to make something happen if you're the Dolphins. Because this roster, before this trade, as constructed, I wouldn't have given it a single shot in the world. Now, if Tyreek Hill can help Tua, they have a lot more of a legitimate chance to compete for the last wild card spot.
All right, Kenneth, bring us home, buddy.
I actually am completely fine with the Chiefs letting go of Tyreek Hill. And the only reason why is because if the Chiefs were to pay Tyreek the $30 million, they would have 42% of their cap tied up in Mahomes, Kelsey, and Hill. And that is a lot of your cap to be taken up when you have rosters the size of the NFL. And they're already paying Chris Jones like $20 million a year. They've got Joe Thuney at 16 a year. So like it starts to add up to the point where like Kansas City would have nowhere else to get better. And I understand that Hill and Mahomes is a lethal connection. But because you've already paid Kelsey, you went and brought in Juju Smith-Schuster on a very cheap deal where if he has a career resurgence with Mahomes like he could, then you can pay him next offseason less than what Tyreek is worth. So I'm okay with it for Kansas City because I think they need the rest of the roster to get better. Like the last couple postseasons, Kansas City has lost not because of their offense. They've lost because the defense hasn't been great. They had to re-up the O-line, which they did a good job of, but that defense just isn't very good, and they had to let Tyrann Mathieu go. So if you're just going to then sign Tyreek Hill, what indication is there that you were going to get to the Super Bowl next year with that crew? Like we just talked about teams like Buffalo re-upped and the Chargers got better and like all these teams got better. And Kansas City, I think if you lock yourself into Hill for the next 4 years, then you're basically saying, look, this is the group for the next 4 years, figure it out. And I don't think they had enough to do it. I think getting the draft picks gives them enough. We talked about how this is a good wide receiver class. Go and get a wide receiver to pair with Juju and you obviously have Kelsey there and Hardman and guys like I still think the offense can be good without having to have that $30 million on your payroll, and they can instead go out and maybe get better in other areas. And I agree with Jurg. Like, I don't think a rookie is going to come in and he's going to have like Tyreek Hill production, but I think a rookie could come in and paired with Juju, you could replicate the production that Tyreek Hill brings to the table. And it's because you have Patrick Mahomes. You have the best QB in the NFL. So I get that it's an unpopular one of letting Tyreek go because we're like, man, that's such a great duo to watch. They're so fun to watch, and they're also just great when they're playing together. But that's just so much money to be giving to a wide receiver when you have so many other holes, and those holes have been exposed in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs, against the Bengals last year. Let's face it, they were lucky to get to that Bengals game. They shouldn't have even beat Buffalo in that game if it weren't for some lucky plays. So I mean, I look at Kansas City and I'm like, I'm okay with you letting Tyreek walk for the price tag that they did. And then you get all these draft picks back. Now you can still pay all these guys that you have in Kansas City. You can re-up at wide receiver, at other positions through these draft picks and not have to pay them the crazy money that you would have to pay Tyreek. So I'm actually okay with it overall, even if it is an unpopular opinion.
Well, yeah, I think you guys nailed it. Yeah, well, the league has been shaken up to say the least, and I'm pretty sure I thought we were done with the big moves, but they just keep on coming. This NFL offseason is insanity. It's chaos, but it's beautiful because we get to talk about it. So yeah, that'll do it for this week. Wow, what a star-studded episode. Jurg, Kenneth, Dame, beautiful job. Kenneth, thank you so much for joining us. We would love to have you back, of course. Yeah, any plugins? We want to shout anything out before we sign off with our socials?
Yeah, just go and check out the Competitive Hedge Podcast. That's the podcast that I do. We talk sports, but also on the betting side of things. So we haven't put out an episode in a couple weeks. I got married a couple weeks ago, and then I got COVID.
Congrats!
So, marriage and then COVID has kind of derailed putting out episodes, but starting to feel a lot better today. Going to be doing one on Saturday here to get another one out there. So just go check out Competitive Hedge Podcast. It's on all social platforms and all the podcasting platforms as well. So Chris, Dame, Jurg, this was a ton of fun. Thanks for having me on. I'll definitely be on in the future. I love talking sports with you guys.
Got it. Likewise, brother. Likewise. Yeah, Jurg will also send us the links so we can put it in the description. Jurg, where can they find us on the socials?
Well, just real quick, of course, Kenneth mentioning it. If you want to make some money, this is the guy to go to for sports betting. He has a very well-known track record. He is a guy who puts out great bets, and I've been on Competitive Hedge before. It's a ton of fun, to be honest. It's an amazing show run by an amazing man, and it's been like Kenneth mentioned, it's been a little bit for him. It's been a bit since I got to talk with him. Loved having you on, brother. For our own podcast, of course, the people know is the SomeWhatSports page on Instagram, where you can like our post, comment on whatever takes that we have, potentially some of these Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams takes, as well as others. And of course, follow there. And of course, here on the Somewhat Sports YouTube, like, comment on the videos, subscribe to the channel, and just let us know how we're doing and follow us along on this ride. That very soon here, big project for the show coming up, and big announcements in the near future as well. We're excited here. Big things only for 2022.
Beautifully said, as always, Jurg. Yeah. So like I said, Jurg, Kenneth, Dame, headed out the park. To all the listeners listening, if you made it this far, thank you. We appreciate the shit out of you. And until next time, peace.